Hello, and welcome to our Summer Scalers adult panel. I'm Jennifer McMahon, author of Creepy Stories, and this year's Summer Scares spokesperson. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. A link to the 2026 Summer Scares programming guide was included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download it, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the link located there. If you have any trouble, please contact Booklist at webinars@booklistonline.com. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions and will pass along any other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Booklists offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable them on your screen, please look for and click the Show Captions icon on the toolbar mentioned earlier. If you choose the Enable Subtitles, you can adjust the size of them at any time by selecting Caption Settings. And finally, Booklist expects all participants to maintain an atmosphere of respect and fairness. Anyone who violates this standard of behavior, including engaging in any form of harassment, may, at the discretion of the organizers, be immediately removed. We would like to start today's webinar with a brief introduction about the Summer Scares program. For those of you unfamiliar, the Summer Scares reading list includes titles selected by a panel of authors and librarians and is designed to promote horror as a great reading option for all ages and during any time of the year. The program is designed by the Horror Writers Association in partnership with iREAD, Book Riot, NoveList, and Booklist. As I mentioned earlier, we sent a link to the 2026 Summer Scares programming guide in the reminder email, but please feel free to ask for that in the Q&A box if you are unable to locate it. We'd be happy to share it with you. So let's get to the reason we're here, the wonderful books. Today we have the pleasure of hearing from Shane Hawk and Ted Van Alst, editors of Never Whistle at Night from Vintage, CJ Leede, author of MAEVE FLY from Torn Nightfire, and Noah Medlock, author of A Botanical Garden from Titan Books. We will hear a brief presentation from each of the panelists about their book, then we'll move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. And so we are going to begin with Shane Hawk and Ted Van Alst. Thank you so much for being here, and tell us all about Never Whistle at Night.
Thanks for having us. We're so excited to be
Thank you. That's great.
I guess I'll start off. It's an amazing anthology that we sold to Penguin Random House in 2021 based on this really cool idea that we got in like late 2020. It came together in a really cool kind of indie fashion in that we were just kind of DMing folks and just trying to get them invited to be a part of this project. We didn't know how big it was going to become. So we were just kind of cold emailing established Indigenous writers to be a part of the project. We thought we were going to kickstart it. But lo and behold, we got an agent through the process, and she helped sell it on the big stage. And so what we have here is a project that is born of the idea that we should get more Indigenous writers published in general, because we were looking at stats back during the pandemic that Native American or Indigenous writers, well, actually all people involved in the publishing industry from top to bottom make up less than 1%. And so our mission statement since the first book, because now we have a second one coming, is to push more Native, First Nations, Indigenous writers to put themselves out there and to, start a career in this awesome genre. And so we started out with this idea that about half of the book or so is established authors, names that you might recognize. And the other half or so are from an open call. And so half of the stories, we didn't label them in the table of contents, but about half of the book is writers that we got these open call stories from. We held it for a few months and we went through all the stories with our readers and we selected an amazing bunch. And so what we have
Uh,
here in the first one, sorry, I just got to finish up here, is 26 stories um, that are ranging from all sorts of types of subgenres of horror. So you have creatures, you have some legends here and there, you have modern day social commentary, what natives go through on the day to day that is horror to us, and a lot of through lines through a lot of the different things.
yeah, I was going to add, the open call was fantastic. We were, reading along with our readers. I can't remember what the final number was. It was well over 100 submissions.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really hard because obviously we're like, oh my God, there's so many great stories here. And we really had to work really hard to just sort of to glean down what we felt were the best ones. And so to add to that, the thing that I think really lifted it was community. Community, native readers, horror readers, dark fiction folks, everybody just kind of got on board because it was something new. And I, Shane and I, in putting it together, I mean, I'm older. I've been thinking about this for a long time because there are stories that we kind of tell each other that just, I'm like, these are fantastic stories, and how could we get these out in the world? And so I'm lucky I knew enough people to sort of say, hey, will you do this? And Stephen Graham Jones and I've known each other for, I don't know, more like 17 years now or whatever it is. And so we decided like, okay, he's in, and that kind of attracted other people. So between that and the open call, we just got some really fantastic submissions, and it was really difficult to select them. And we just went through the same thing with the part two. So we've been working on that, and we're just really excited. This is a collection of stories that run the gamut, like Shane said, all sorts of dark fiction, and we just think there's something in there for everybody. And we hope that in your reading, you find those stories that will stop and stick to your heart both. So I just wanted to say that, and thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Plenty of stories in there to open up reader discussions at the libraries.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shane and Ted. And I am super excited to hear there's another book coming. Yay. I'm so excited. And I'm excited to talk more about this one. And next up, we are going to hear from CJ Leede, author of MAEVE FLY. Welcome, CJ. Tell us about your book.
Hello, thank you. And I love Never Whistle at Night, so it's fun to follow. Mayfly works as a princess, an ice princess at a theme park in Anaheim that for sure totally doesn't actually exist. And she loves her life. She's got her things. She loves Halloween. She loves maybe kind of dodgy videos. Her routines. She loves especially her grandmother, who was kind of an old Hollywood actress, and her best friend, Kate. And she is somebody who does not want any change in her life. And when change inevitably comes, because that is this entire life experience, she doesn't handle it super well. The change is coming in the form of Kate kind of moving away from her, her grandmother being very ill, and Maeve dealing with a lot of anticipatory grief, and somebody new coming to town. And the book is kind of showing somebody who finds herself alone in her world and so turns, as naturally one does, to misanthropic literature to instruct her on how to handle all this change. And so she's got Story of the Eye, she's got Notes from Underground, and she's got American Psycho, and takes a bloodier turn in her life. Um, So yeah, it's kind of a it's an LA book. It's very much like a love letter to place, like all my work, and talks a lot about how Los Angeles and this theme park that totally doesn't exist for legal reasons, both kind of were created the way they were in order to give this feeling that we'll never age. Like we'll be youths forever. We can be eternally young, and we don't have to have life change around us, like if we hold on tight enough. But sadly, grief and loss and mortality just kind of have other plans. So, yeah. Love letter to LA. It's kind of a hockey romance, a little bit. Um, it's very much a love letter to a type of literature and an exploration of whether a woman can be really monstrous without having traumatic backstory built in. It's certainly at least something kind of done to her by men or the world. And so I had a lot of fun building that. It's fun, it's gnarly, it's weird. There are eggs and eyeballs, if you know, you know, and it's very much like weird girl freak fiction, high freak flag. I think that's I think that's kind of it. That's Mayfly. And thanks for having me.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, CJ. That was a great description of the book. So thank you, CJ. We will now be joined by Noah Medlock, author of A Botanical Daughter. Take it away and tell us about the book, Noah.
Hello, hello. Well, it's really fun to follow CJ because I'm actually currently reading MAEVE FLY. And yes, it is absolutely a messed up hockey romance. Shane and Ilya could never. Um, and it's particularly fun for me to read because I work in musical theatre and I used to teach teenagers at a time when the unnamed ice princess was at her height, shall we say. So it's fun to see her live her kind of righteous fury. Anyway, to talk about me and Botanical Daughter, Botanical Daughter is my debut novel. It came out 2 years ago. It's a queer gothic horror set in an exquisite greenhouse. Um, Gregor and Simon have hidden their relationship away in the countryside of England and are living this kind of idyllic life in the greenhouse until Gregor gets this idea. He finds a mycelium, a kind of a fungal mass, which can transfer information within itself and is looking after an orchid. And he extrapolates that idea to make a kind of garden that is cooperating with itself. And he extrapolates that idea until it becomes a kind of child that is operating itself in Frankenstein style using a dead body. And the unpredictable element then is the new housekeeper who happens to know the cadaver, but she doesn't realize it's her. And this new entity, this garden girl called Chloe, takes on a kind of personality of her own as the macrocosm of all these plant and fungal elements. And the relationship, the two girls' relationship, really propels us to the end of the story, which I shan't spoil. Yeah, it came out 2 years ago. It's with Titan Books. It's been a lot of very pleasant nonsense. It's completely not what I expected my life to go like. I'm a musician by trade, and just gradually it's taken up more and more of my life until now it's almost 50-50 as an author and a musician. And I think that's me done.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Noah. That was excellent. So we will now move on to the panel portion of our webinar. So I'm going to invite everyone else to rejoin us for our conversation. And we'll get a little deeper into things here. These are all such great books. This is so much fun to have everyone here.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's to the beginning. So Summer Scares is all about getting folks into their libraries to discover the wonderful world of horror and all it has to offer, right? So my question for all of you is, what got you into horror? Was there one moment, a book or a movie that hooked you? And what is it about horror you love? And what drives you to write and edit the kind of stuff you do? Why do you love horror? And we'll start right here with CJ.
Uh, I think it's like a few-parter, as it probably is for everyone. I grew up obsessed with Rocky Horror Picture Show, which isn't quite, but I think, the sort of like camp horror. And then in 2015, I never read horror growing up. In 2015, I remember I was in Washington State and I went to a bookstore and I picked up a copy of a book I thought was like a fantasy novel, and it was The Library at Mount Char, and which kind of is a fantasy novel, but I would also call it horror. And it like changed my brain chemistry. I was like never the same. I think I've read it like 11 times. Like it's a little bit like unhealthy actually. Yeah, okay. In the comments, I make friends with this book. This is one of these like if you love it, we're like in now. So yeah, it changed my life. Highly recommend. I think he's got a second book coming out finally.
Awesome. Thank you. How about you, Shane? What got you into horror?
My first waking memory is when I was 4 years old, and my grandma took me across the street from her house during Halloween. And the neighbor, the guy living there, was wearing a pig mask. It was very realistic looking, and he was snorting and like making all these weird guttural sounds. And it's just my first waking memory as a human being. So I've always been kind of spooked, but also kind of attracted to just weird shit. Sorry if I can't curse. um, Weird things since I was a kid. And my dad showing me movies that, I had no business watching at, 5, 6, 7 years old. I was really a horror nerd for movies, I'll be honest. I wasn't much of a horror reader as a kid, except for Goosebumps, which is like everyone's story or a lot of people's story, at least 90s kids. And just kind of always, I love the rush of being scared and then the thrill of scaring others and then just seeing their reactions. I'm still kind of juvenile that way, hiding around the corner from my daughter and just being like, but she loves it too. And I don't know, I just love the thrill of it. I love that it's, a safe place to experience blood instead of a realistic, ugly place that you can get hurt. I can kind of explore all sorts of things. I'm really drawn to the genre, both writing it and editing it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it is a safe place to explore all that freaky stuff. I love it. How about you, Ted?
Wow. Well, I'm old, so Goosebumps for my kids. But it's a few things like CJ's. It's a multi-part thing. So I've always been a reader, and I think probably there were a couple things that did it for me, and it was reading. In grammar school, I went to Chicago Public Schools. So in grammar school, I found these like the eighth graders, whatever the anthologies that they had, and so I picked through them. And what I read was, I was probably 8. So I read The Telltale Heart, The Devil and Daniel Webster, and The Monkey's Paw. And those are the sort of my 3, like, things that put my writing together if I had to sort of draw on what this comes from. But through the years, always watching on TV, Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, even like Abbott and Costello meet Dracula, all of that kind of stuff. And we had a thing in Chicago called Creature Features, and it came on Friday nights. And it has the Henry Mancini, The Stroll. It's fantastic show, and they would always show this crazy stuff, which I wasn't supposed to watch. I was like 5 years old, and me and my brother had bunk beds on the sun porch, and I would stick my head around the corner, and I'd watch because my parents would be watching it, right? So I would always watch these movies, and they had crazy stuff back in the day. So between that and then when I was a little bit older, I saw Young Frankenstein in the theater at the Granada, which has since been turned into like yuppie condos. And I saw The Exorcist, the X-rated version of The Exorcist when I was 12. And I remember because we had this theater in the neighborhood, and there was $1, and there was like second, third run. They didn't care. And I remember the big X coming on the screen. And so watching The Exorcist, and then jumping from the threshold of my room to my bed for about 6 months, really just sort of gave me that. But those things, the young Frankenstein, that horror. I write crime and horror, and I try to write humor. I sometimes pretty fun because crime is hilarious, horror is funny. All of these things that can happen. So when I try to put that together, and then having the Devil and Daniel Webster, the thing for me about horror is that it's a veil-free genre. There's no veil for me. Most of my stories are filled with like Astaroth and Asmodeus and Valifort, and they're I'm trying not to swear, but they're schmoes, right? They're bored. They have jobs. It's really kind of awful. So I'm able to pull in demons, whatever kind of figure or creature that I want in horror, because you're reading horror. I don't have, there's no disclaimer, right? Well, obviously the devil arrives in his smoking jacket, right? This is what happens. This is how the world works. And so that for me is horror. So reading other people's take and editing and writing, it's just, man, there's no genre for me like horror. It's the best.
Oh, totally agree. Love that. And I read The Monkey's Paw when I was pretty young, and it shaped me. It's one of those stories I go back again and again to and tell everyone that they should read it. So everyone out there, if you have not read The Monkey's Paw, go check it out. It's great stuff.
It's the ultimate careful what you wish for. And the story I did for Never Whistle at Night, I was like, oh my God, it's the careful what you wish for. You know, it just never goes away. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It also has does that beautiful thing in horror of like, what you imagine is worse than what they could show, like that final scene of what's behind the door. We don't ever see what's behind the door because I love it.
Oh, fantastic.
Great stuff. All right, Noah, how about you? What got you into horror? What was your thing?
A lot of the above, definitely. Goosebumps as a 90s kid, that was way too scary for me. But that was my kind of foray into it. And then through musical theatre, stuff like Rocky Horror, stuff like Little Shop of Horrors, obviously, given my novel, and Sweeney Todd as well.
Yes.
These are the heightened element of musical theatre, I think, is something that's fed into my writing. The way that it's abstracted and lifted. I think horror is a playground that you can get away with more stuff, I suppose, like Ted was saying. There's no baseline, there's no top to it. It just fills the space that you've got for it. Another shout out I'd like to give is to The Black Cauldron, which is an 80s Disney movie, which was notoriously unsuccessful, but has some really interesting horror beats. And that Horned King, yes, he's one of the scariest creations I think Disney's made.
Oh, I'm gonna have to look for The Black Cauldron. I don't know that one.
Oh yeah.
Very cool. Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah, I love that all of you sort of touched on horror being sort of a big, limitless playground where there are no rules. We get to make our own rules. We can make anything happen, which is really wonderful. So my next question was talking a little bit about the inspiration behind your books, which you've kind of touched on when you were talking about your books. I was wondering about the spark that started the story for you and why it felt important to write. And also, what is the thing that surprised you the most as you got into writing or editing? So Noah, you're right here. Let's do, your book is such like a beautiful and original take on the Frankenstein story. Can you talk about how Mary Shelley's Frankenstein played a role, and now also maybe how Little Shop of Horrors played a role in inspiring you with this?
Well, I suppose Frankenstein wasn't the jumping off point, but rather was the bridge. The jumping off point was, I'd love to write a story about gay men in the Victorian era. I'd love to write a story in a greenhouse. And then, like, how would they get a child? Like, modern times, you can have all kinds of scientific things, you can have adoption. But back then, in a fantasy world, how would you procure a child? And so Frankenstein became the solution to that problem. In terms of that. And then I guess the thing that surprised me the most is the character of Jennifer. I'd sat down to write the story of these two gentlemen, and their relationship is really key to the story. But then Jennifer is this third party who is motivated from the very beginning by grief, really. I was like, where is this coming from? Why am I like emoting so much? Where is this? And so I think that was a bit of a vehicle for my subconscious and resulted in a lot of introspection. But it completely was not on the planning document in any way.
Yeah. Wow. Awesome. That's excellent. I love it when characters just appear and do their own thing, and it's like they have their own lives on the pages of the story, right? How about you, CJ? What do you want to talk a little bit about the inspiration behind Maeve? How did you come up with Maeve? And you could talk a little bit about LA. You could talk, I can't really see the story setting taking place anywhere but LA. Like, what was the spark that started it, and what surprised you the most as you got into the story?
Yeah, when I moved to LA, which was a few months, so I moved to LA in 2019, and a few months later, COVID hit. And I also had this feeling that a lot of ex-New Yorkers moving to LA have, which is like, I've made a terrible mistake. It's a great city, but I just like totally panicked. I hadn't lived anywhere but New York in my adult life, and I was shut in my house. And so I thought, well, I can't even really go explore the city in the way that I thought I could. So at least maybe I'll kind of learn about it a little bit. So I started reading a lot of books on the history of the city. I started driving around, kind of like experiencing the city from my car in this very like dead time. And I have this feeling that if you look closely enough at anything, you're gonna end up falling in love with it. And so that was very much a surprise of this book, but it helped my relationship with the city. But what I knew I did love about LA going into it was the tiki bars. I love a tiki bar. I love a themed place in general, like very into like weird kitsch and Americana aesthetic and like the history of those things. And so I knew I was going to have a lot of tiki bars. I knew I was going to have a lot of fun with it. And then there's also the aspect of like Patrick Bateman. So obviously, like he wanted his res at what was it, Dorsia. I wanted there to be places like that. I wanted like Maeve to be able to interact with place in the same way and kind of stomp through the city like metaphorically, like a Patrick Bateman, almost like a Godzilla, like really be powerful in a way that I personally, as a woman, physically in my life, don't often feel. And so I wanted to feel impervious in a time of chaos and the world changing, and wanted to understand the city I was in, and also wanted to yeah, I wanted to get to be a Patrick Bateman in this fictional setting. So that was kind of, but it all started with the idea of rewriting Story of the Eye from a female perspective, just as an exercise, which was something I spontaneously became obsessed with. And Story of the Eye is a very debaucherous 20s novella. Yeah, maybe you've all read it. Maybe I've got a lot of wonderful freaks here. Highly recommend. It's like 90 pages of like, what? What? So yeah, all of those things.
Oh, that's awesome. I love hearing about all the things that kind of came together at once. And I'm just trying to imagine driving around LA during lockdown when everything is closed and how surreal that must have been, having
It was
only been in
crazy.
LA in
Yeah.
regular times. So
And,
yeah.
and there are a lot of YouTube and Reddit of like the theme park and those things, like a lot of like stories from the internet.
Yeah. Wow. Very interesting. Shane. You want to talk a little bit about the inspiration? Like you guys already talked about it a little bit, and I was sort of hoping that both you and Ted could maybe tell us a little bit. You each have a story in the collection.
Yeah,
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
sure. Ted, you want to go first, or
I can. That's fine.
okay?
Cool.
Yeah, no problem. I already kind of, gave it away a little bit with the monkey's paw thing, but there's a more to it than that. And I mean, I write everything's in Chicago, and I write for people in Chicago. So, like Becky's here, she'll know. The story's called "The Longest Street in the World," and I know it's in Toronto, but the actual important longest street in the world is Western Avenue, Chicago. It's just so the story is set on Western Avenue, and it's set back in the day, kind of thing, in the 70s. And what I wanted to do is the first story I ever wrote set on the South Side. Everything takes place up north on the North Side. So, but I lived on the South Side for a while and I know the area well. So I was like, I'm going to set a story out here. And so the story itself, there is revenge in there, but the motivation for it is kind of random. But it's also it's a racially motivated incident that takes place, right? And so that sets everything into motion. What seems like this sort of innocuous thing, that's how casual racism. It's just not even, thinking about what you're doing and just doing the thuggish thing that you should not have done. And so it sets off Junior, and this is what happens in the story. So but I'm a creature guy, so there's definitely a creature in there, and I wanted to work it in. I wanted folks to know this is not any kind of a traditional entity, right? This is a creature made solely for this world. There's nothing inferred or inflected in any way that this is, a tribally, important or historical sort of figure. It's just, so he's there, which is great because that I didn't want that, and B, I wanted Lewis to be able to do whatever he wanted and not be constrained in any sort of way. So the inspiration is all of those things that I talked about, and in the middle of it, there's a robbery because that's how crime works. And it actually is funny. I think it's really funny, and people are like, "Yeah, actually, that is a pretty funny part of the story." And so that kind of set for me a lot of what I've been working on since, because that allowed me to go, "Hey, I can do this," and people like it, and there's a response to it because I know that I like it, and what I'm always going to write is what I want to read and what I like, and so it's great when people respond to it. So I don't want to give any more of it away, but if you read the story, you haven't read it yet, just know that there's a lot of humor in there. And as one reader pointed out, I think this story starts with the longest sentence in the world, and she counted them up. It's like 256 words, man. Yes, there's this little meta underneath it.
That's
So
awesome.
it's cool. I hope people dig it. It's a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
it's a great story. It's a great story.
Thank
How
you.
about you,
Thank
Shane?
you.
Yeah, my story in Never Whistle at Night Part 1 is titled Behind Colin's Eyes, which was a little wordplay with being colonized, because it's ultimately a possession story, and it's heavily influenced, if not totally influenced, by my dad. And he's actually the character Colin in the story, so it's very much a Hawk family story. I just spruced it up with a bit more horror, so I cranked the horror up to 11. And just like Ted, I didn't want to kind of incorporate any legends from my own tribes, at least in this one, because I just wanted the freedom to explore what the heck this thing could be. And I also love ambiguity and allowing reader interpretations, because everyone's different. And so this is a story of a 10-year-old boy in northeastern Utah. This is the story of my dad and my grandpa Hawk, and an encounter that they had while they're hunting. And I don't want to give too much away because I already said possession, but things don't go so well for my dad and my grandpa. And it was really cool working on this with my dad, because I'd text him or go over to his house, and we, it was a time to bond as well, and then learn other side stories. All the details that are in there are exactly as they were, except for like little tiny tweaks. Like my dad goes by Clay, and so I didn't want to. He said, "Don't put my name in there." So I said, "Okay, Colin." And down to like the dog in there is his real dog, Tiny. He even told me about the comic book that he was reading that summer, that autumn, that fall. And I even found it on eBay. So while I was drafting the story, I bought the comic and I had it like on my desk while I was writing. And it was just kind of cool to have that little piece right there. But yeah, it's like 80% of a family story, and then kind of spruce it up a little bit, go a little crazy. And in the next book, Never Whistle at Night Part 2, I actually write a sequel story to that, called Ivories, that takes place 50 years later. and I'm the protagonist as a dad. So
Oh,
kind of
that's
cool to
so
connect it.
cool. Very cool. I love it. Oh, I'm looking forward to that. That is
Thank you.
great. So I have a follow-up question from one of the attendees here that kind of goes with this. Do you authors ever find yourselves tingling your own spines while you write, or is it a more disconnected process? It seems you have to spend a lot of time in some dark places to make your way through. So what do we think? Do we ever creep ourselves out? Is something ever too much for us? Yeah, why don't you start, Shane? Because here you are.
Sure. I'd say it's a mixture of those two.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm totally dissociated when I'm writing and just the words flow out. Other times, yeah, I'll get really stuck into like a rabbit hole, either in research or exploring my own story and start to creep myself out. There's a lot of supernatural occurrences at the Hawk Nest over here. So the light will start to flicker above my head and, start hearing thumps and stuff and worse things. So it really does kind of like when I get to dark places, it kind of echoes in my house. So I have to kind of, treat the darkness nicely and hope that, nothing comes. But yeah, I get creeped out because it kind of manifests in real life. I don't know.
Wow. All right. Treat the darkness nicely. I like that a lot. I think I'm gonna write that and put that next to my desk for when I scare myself. CJ, do you ever get creeped out by your own writing, or when you're going to these dark places? Is something ever too much for you?
Uh, I don't like for sure. But at least with Maeve, I kind of like wrote it anyway. Um, there were scenes that I just like closed the curtains and day drank to write. And now I'm like, I'm so glad because they're like some of my favorite scenes. I mean, they're gnarly. It's a splatterpunk book, but it's also like, when you're reading a scene, it might take 20 seconds. When you're writing a scene, it could take like 2 weeks. So you're really living in it. And um, yeah, I sometimes it is too much. I frankly like with this book, I surprised myself with the level of feeling I had. Definitely I knew rage was there, but like real grief. And that almost felt like too much at times. But I kind of think like good writing has a cost, like we have to not to sound like a crazy person, but I don't think it's so bad to feel like we're skating an edge or pushing ourselves really to kind of reach into the darkness and try and find something to kind of bring back something light, something maybe transformative or helpful to bring back to those not staring the beast in the eye all day long.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Absolutely. Ted, what do you think? Do you ever get creeped out?
Oh, I think in the stories you can tell when I get creeped out because I had a professor one time who was like, "What's with you and the jokes all the time?" He goes, "It's like poor man's vodka," and I was like, I was really offended by that. So I just told better jokes and then started making fun of him. So how do you like that? What happens when I write and my writing is really dialogue heavy. I think the story carries through in dialogue. My hero growing up when I was a kid was Jackie Collins because nobody writes dialogue like Jackie. That was the best. She was great at it. And I like the idea of pushing the story forward through the dialogue. I just do. That just, sometimes I look at them like it's like a play. You got to give the people some rest here. But what happens is I have characters. I'm bringing whoever, and sometimes they're knocking at the door. I only write at night, so they're knocking at the door, and the characters arrive, and I know what they look like, and I'm not real descriptive and stuff unless it need to be like for a creature or something. But they just start talking, and so I'm just trying to hold on like what they're talking about, and so they're and so it'll get dark, and this is how you can tell like I have to make something funny happen because I'm a chicken shit. I'm like, woo, we're gonna derail that. It's a bit much. So if you read my story, it's some funny stuff that you're like, oh, he was scared when he was writing this. I could tell because now he's like cracking jokes or whatever. So yeah, I think for me that's a really big part of it is hanging on, writing the scene. And the scenes get scary and the scenes get dark and but ultimately I'm the writer, so I can I could put the e-brake on that if I want to. So, but sometimes you just let it go and you're like, where are we going with this? And some, yeah, it's not me, it's the characters. They do some really wild stuff that I'm just like, all right, I'm just gonna write it down because man, that was crazy. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in following the characters where they take you and chasing those fears and not looking away from them, right? Like I think that's what we all
Hmm.
need to do as horror authors is not turn away from the fears, but kind
That's
of
right.
embrace them and use them and put them to work for us, right? Noah, do you ever creep yourself out, get scared, or how do you deal with going to the dark places?
Yeah, I think I'll echo CJ in that. I think I write in character, although it's third person. I am really kind of in it and experiencing it. Um, and there's a sequence where, yeah, this not too spoilery. Jennifer is digging up the grave of her friend, and I know that that grave is empty.
Yeah.
But because I'm in Jennifer at that exact moment, I feel like I'm scrambling and pulling this hillside apart. And then the shock of the body not being there, I remember being so visceral. And it's like, it's the power of story, right? If the author can surprise themselves, even though I'd planned it. I knew that. I knew that.
Yeah.
So I think the mental states I think I slip into quite easily. So the kind of rising fear towards the denouement as well is something that I remember having to talk myself down from afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay, let's go into, I think what I want to know next is, so these books are going to be out in libraries and people are going to be reading them and there's going to be book clubs and book discussions. And I'm wondering what's the one thing that you're hoping that readers will take away from your book and what are you kind of hoping they'll discover or be processing and thinking about and discussing when they close the cover? Let's start with Noah. And like tell us what you think, what you're hoping that people will be thinking about and talking about it after reading Botanical Daughter. I loved the callback to Frankenstein. It made me think a lot about families and what a family is and bodily autonomy. It just brought up so many issues for me. But what are you hoping that you leave readers with?
Yeah, if I had to choose one kind of topic area, I imagine it's family, right? And family is what you make it, like literally make it. Um, People have said it's like a story about found family, except you find it with a shovel in this context. And so and there's an absolute beauty in that, and I think that's an important area to depict in queer stories. But then I also wanted, because it's horror, I also wanted to spoil it. And it is a way that's a story about how found family can actually be manipulated,
Yeah.
taken advantage of. And then there's hopefully a mirror between the idea of found family with these separate organisms working mutually for their shared benefit, and also to the planted cadaver, which is Chloe, the idea of this macro organism. So I think that area is something I'd love for readers to discuss.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure they will be. I still have images in my mind of Chloe. I'll be out working in my garden and I'll see a particular tendril or something and I'll think of Chloe. Oh, yeah. CJ, what are you hoping people will be what are you hoping people will be lingering and thinking about and talking about after they finish Mayfly? And for me, it was I thought about so many things, but one of the big things for me was the role of women in horror and just women in violence. And Maeve goes to these places just because of who she is, not because someone necessarily pushed her there. I think you said that when you were first describing the book a little bit. This isn't really a revenge story. This is just a story. She's not anyone's victim, right? So that's what I took away. But what are you hoping folks are going to take away and talk about and think about?
Yeah, I very much so. I think she's not anyone's victim, except there's the potentiality for her to be a victim of herself. And I think with Mayfly in particular, but any of my books, like I just want people to like feel so much, everything. Like I want you to feel rage and like feel turned on and feel like elated and excited and terrified and like devastated. And I want people to feel everything. I want people to laugh, like literally cry. And I try to pack that in because I think somebody brought this up earlier, like horror is a safe arena. Like it's a book. You're going to close it, you're going to move on. This life can be so brutal. And I touch on topics that are terrible. Anticipatory grief, terrible. Loss, terrible. Like dealing with your life spinning away from you is like, it's awful. And so I think the real world can be so hard. I would love it for my readers to be able to like open up MAEVE FLY, feel everything totally extremely and insanely, and maybe fall in love and maybe throw up and all of the things, and then close it and go live life. Maybe a little more fully. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. Shane, what are you hoping people take away from Never Whistle at Night? One of the things that it really made me think about was the power of stories, right? The power of
Yeah.
stories in, the way they shape us and the hold they have over us and the stories that are passed down and the stories that are kind of in our DNA. And anyway, that's what I took away. But what are you hoping readers are
That's
going to take
great.
away and think about and be talking about?
Yeah. One of my main hopes with the collection, the anthology, is seeing the breadth of not just horror but indigenous horror. And I hope that the readers come away with it, once they close the final page, they start thinking, why would this be horror, to indigenous folks? Why would they find this scary? Maybe become a little reflective, where people can start to, think outside of their own culture, their own upbringing. Is this something that, a lot of these native folks deal with on the daily? Are they speaking through their grandfathers and their grandmothers? Oh, I didn't know about blood quantum. Let me go research that. What does that mean? Do they really, have this kind of separate type of colorism within their communities? Or, what do you do if you betray, your values of your community and you're willing to cut off your native side and you're just going to be a white guy, like the DHS guy? But what's going to happen? So, there's so many stories. There's 26, so I can't really touch on all of them. But
Yeah,
as a whole, just I hope people just kind of sit there and kind of take it in, whether after each story or at the very end, and just be reflective. And know that we're not coming to story from the Western kind of canon, the lens that everyone's kind of used to.
yeah, that's great stuff to think about. Ted.
Yeah, I was going to say, Stephen Graham Jones touches on that in his intro to it. Like, these stories are different. These are native stories, and a lot of times they just end. So don't get mad when they just end. And then people write reviews and they're mad because they just end. Why is it like that? Some of those reviews too are like, and I could maybe try to answer a question that's popped up in the box there. People have read it and they're like, well, I thought this was going to be a book about myths and legends. And I was like, what part of dark fiction on the cover says myths and legends, right? So while there's a lot of the sort of, to go back to Blood Corn, there's a lot of the DNA that runs through these stories. These are, and this is what I hope, these are contemporary indigenous writers, right? These are current native folks in the 21st century writing about the horrors of the last 500 years, or writing about the horror of yesterday on the L, taking the train home, or whatever it happens to be. And we were very hopeful in that folks would come away with this going, Native folks are still here. There are over 500 tribal nations in this country, right? And so the question in the box was, with so many differences in Native beliefs and traditions, do you also select stories based on tribal regions? So one of the things I did, in you can maybe see it now, but if you look at the table of contents, the TOC and where it starts and where it ends, we start up north and we make this big circuit all the way around, right, through all these different tribal nations, down south, and we end up back north again. So the TOC is a circle. It all works together in that way. And it touches on all these, there's different, tribal folks obviously represented in the book across that wide circle. And at the end of it all, I'm really hopeful for is that in seeing that half of these are from new writers or or people who've never published before, along with the established writers, that there's this really rich world, and there's this really diverse of all the diverse groups. American Indians are the most diverse of the diverse folks, right? And I wanted people to see that, but that also it's very contemporary. That people are writing and creating today. That it's not a myths and legends, and those are things that we know and things that live within us. But we're still contemporary people, and so how we process that makes it look better. And sometimes the story just ends because it's supposed to end. So don't worry about it. If it ends and you're mad about it, you could write us and maybe we can work on something new.
That's right. You can kind of invent what you think the ending would be in your own head, right? I think the story
There's a
will
choose
respond
your
to
own
you,
ending.
right? That's a choose your own ending. There you go. Well, our time is flying by. I have one more question for each of you. So this is a program centered on getting folks into the library to read more horror. So I was hoping that each of you could talk a little bit about your relationship with libraries. What do libraries mean with you? Tell me a library story. Yeah, Ted's got his library shirt on. Ted, we'll start with you. To show us your shirt, tell us what your shirt is first.
There's a shirt. These are all the Chicago public libraries in
Yeah.
Chicago. And I've only stolen books from a few of them when I was a little kid. And so if I ever make any money and I walk onto the next plane, I'm leaving some to the Chicago public libraries because, oh my God. As a kid, that was the one. I'm a nerd. I don't ever remember not knowing how to read. So I read everything. So the library for me was this amazing place. And librarians, if I didn't have this job, I would be a librarian because how cool is that? So library and librarians to me they're like the heroes, right? They're the people who find books, who find people who need books, all of those magic things. Because reading, it really is, it's a magic thing. And writing it, there's a whole world in here. So when life sucks, you're like, I'm checking out, I'm reading a book. Where do you go to get those books? At the library. So for me, librarians have always been there. Shane and I did a panel and we had to sign books. And so what did I do? And I'm talking to the panel of librarians. I'm like, I'm really sorry, but I stole this pen from your library because I just can't help myself. But the library is this resource that man, we have to, it is a sacred place. Libraries are amazing places for us. Especially for kids, especially if you start young, you go to the library. I walked by the daily library here, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and there were kids and people are reading stories to the kid. I love reading stories. I read stories to my kid. This is the thing. And they're starting there, right? This is where magic happens, man. Your whole life changes. So thank you, librarians. You all rock. You're the best. You're my heroes. And a crappy day in the library is way better than your best day at work. That's for sure. So.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Librarians are superheroes. Shane,
How do
what
I
do
follow
libraries
that?
mean to you? Yeah.
I too love libraries and librarians. Yeah, I since I was so small, I've had that light blue Oceanside public library card because I grew up in North County, San Diego here. And I always treasured going with my grandma and my brother to the library. We'd run around. I'd check out so many books. Yeah, late fees and stuff happened, and maybe some stolen, but that happens, right? But it was just always a special place just to just wind down. We'd sit in the beanbag chairs. I'd learn about whatever topic I was interested in, whether it was Saturn or like plants or whatever. And I had that relationship like all throughout until maybe senior year of high school when I was like in punk and metal bands and I stopped reading so much. But I never gave up my love for reading, and I cherish libraries, and it was a really cool moment. It was maybe last year or the year before. My childhood library invited me to speak to their book club, and their first chosen book club book was Never Whistle at Night. And so that was amazing. And so I got to talk to like 50 folks that were, really enthralled by all these stories. So that was really cool for me. But yes,
really
the
cool.
library is super important. I'll support them as long as I can, any local ones.
Awesome. Thank you. CJ, libraries. What do libraries mean to you? Tell us a library story.
So I actually tell this story a lot, especially when I was touring with, I dedicated American Rapture to librarians, and it was because of this. So when I was a kid, I remember this one day in elementary school. I went to public school in Texas, and I remember going to the school library and they said, whatever, you get like 30 minutes, pick whatever book you want, which is like amazing. And I just went and I grabbed something with like, I don't know, a knight and a dragon and a sword on it. And I took it home and I read it in like one night. And I went back the next day and I put it back, or I gave it to the librarian, and I went back to the shelf and I looked at the shelf and I like had this moment where I realized every single one of these is like a new world, is like a new, like I just like I went to a new universe last night and like had my like brain exploded open, and every one of these on every shelf and all over this library is just like here, and they're just all these totally untapped universes. Like it blew my freaking mind. And I think it like changed me forever. It was probably like the moment all of this was set in motion. And it's incredible that that is just a resource that we have. And we got to make sure kids have it because it changed everything for me.
Oh,
Thank you
I
all
love
for all that you do. Yeah.
I love that story. Yeah, no, a lot walking into a library is like a door of magic portals, you know. It's like each book can take you anywhere. It's pretty amazing. So I
No,
love
you like want to shake people on the street and be like, do you
go
know?
to the library.
You know,
You know the magic of the library? You must go. Come. Noah, what about you in libraries?
Yeah, so I'm from a city called Manchester in England. It's weirdly a kind of land of libraries. There's the what's now the Chetham's Library, which is like from the 1500s, where the massive tomes are chained to the wall. There's the John Rylands Library, which is this like blood red Gothic cathedral of books. And there's this Manchester Central Library is like a white, like Roman temple to it. But then it was the local library that changed my life, right? I come from a like quite a deprived area of Manchester. The American equivalent might be like Detroit, and there was this. It was almost like a spaceship, this prefab building which was made out of hexagons. And we went there on our primary school visit. I think that's an elementary school, and yeah, similar to CJ, it's just like, oh, here are books. There's a whole world outside of Newton Heath, this small area of Manchester. People think things and then they write them down and then you think them. And I think it was, rather than being like a bastion of knowledge, which it feels like these fancy libraries are, the local library is sharing the knowledge and sending it out and kind of firing people's brains, turning them into human beings fully. And that is why we need to cherish those kind of libraries that are community vessels of knowledge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, so much library love. So for all the librarians and library workers out there, thank you for all you do. We all so appreciate it. And for anyone who is not working in the library, go to your library and support your local library. There's magic there, as we have all said. The time has flown by. I'm afraid this is all we have time for today. This has been such a blast. Thank you so much, Shane, Ted, CJ, and Noah. This has been an amazing discussion. And let's see, tomorrow, all attendees will be receiving an email containing links to today's video recording, Summer Scares Programming Guide, and a certificate of completion. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit www.booklistonline.com webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones. And don't forget to watch the other Summer Scares panels found on Booklist's YouTube channel. So thank you. Thank you all so much for joining us for today's webinar. And a huge thank you to all our panelists and to all of you for helping us to celebrate the Summer Scares program. This has been fantastic. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.